So I got to play Borderlands 4 early thanks to 2K for flying me out. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with y'all all of Rafa's skills. I'm going to be breaking down all of his skill trees completely. So yeah, if you're interested in Rafa, this is definitely the video for you. Let's go ahead and get into all of these. First off, we're going to be covering his arc knives action skill and skill tree. As you can see, for arc knives, Rafa puts down his guns and equips his arc knives. These are blades that deal melee damage and mark enemies whenever they damage them, causing them to take increased damage for every mark on them. Right trigger to perform melee attacks with Rafa's arc knives, left trigger to dash forward and perform a shock melee attack, and LB to unleash Rafa's Blade Fury, which deals shock damage to all marked enemies and ends the skill. So each enemy you marked after you press LB, every single one of them will be damaged, even if they're not in proximity. Now carrying on to the arc knife skill tree. Keep in mind you can get these stronger the more points you invest into each skill. Starting off here with Handshake Deal. This makes it so Rafa gains increased gun damage and melee damage. There's also another skill called Midnight Oil. This makes it so Rafa's action skills deal bonus corrosive damage. The longer the skill has been active, the greater the bonus damage. And there's another passive skill called Expedite. Overdrive skill. The Overdrive grants Rafa further increased move speed. Next passive skill here is Diamond Hands. This makes it so dealing melee damage grants Rafa a stack of Diamond Hands. Gain increased gun damage for every stack of Diamond Hands. Once Rafa deals gun damage, stack begins to decay quickly until they run out. Anyways, next here is Dead Man Walking. This is an augment skill. Arc Knives does not end when its duration runs out. Instead, it only ends if Rafa enters Fight for Your Life or activates Blade Fury while Arc Knives duration is depleted. Rafa loses health instead. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy, he gains Overshield. El Corazon. This makes it so a portion of Rafa's maximum health capacity is converted into maximum shield capacity. Altered Cabron. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy while Arc Knives is active, restore a portion of his maximum health capacity. Whenever Rafa gains health, deal bonus corrosive damage with all attacks and gain increased movement speed. This effect also stacks. Max stacks is 25. Can't invest multiple skill points into this one. Anyways, carrying on here is another passive skill called Dial In. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with a melee attack, his melee attacks gain critical hit chance. This chance stacks and all stacks are removed whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy. Anyways, carrying on here, Solder. This is a passive skill. Rafa's melee critical hits gain lifesteal. In the Zone. Kill skill, killing an enemy freezes overdrive duration. Starting off with duration of plus 2 seconds. Of course, the more you invest into it, the better it gets. Next up here is a skill called To the Last. This requires at least 1 point in the El Corazon skill, and as you can see, this makes it so Rafa gains increased gun damage and increased skill damage. The lower his health, the greater the bonuses. Hard Sell. Whenever Rafa's shields break, he instantly gains a portion of his shield maximum capacity as Overshield. This skill cannot be used again until Rafa activates his action skill. Start off with plus 9% of maximum shield capacity. Elaborate Ignition. Overdrive skill. Rafa deals bonus damage of his weapon's element with all skills and ordinances while Overdrive is active. Start off with bonus damage of plus 12%. Of course, the higher you get this, the more bonus damage. Next up here is Parting Gift. This is another augment skill, so you can't get this one any stronger. But what it does is, whenever Rafa activates his dash attack, he leaves behind a grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. Enemies damaged by these grenades become marked. Whenever Rafa applies a mark to an enemy, you can apply an additional mark. Artilleria. This is a passive skill that you can level up. Rafa gains increased ordnance cooldown rate, starting off with plus 11% cooldown rate. Booming Business. Whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy, he gains a chance to spawn a free grenade. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a grenade based on that. Demolitions. As you can see, this is a passive skill that you can only invest 1 in. It states Overdrive skill. While Overdrive is active, Rafa may use grenades while cooling down at the cost of health. Every time a grenade is used this way, it costs more health until Rafa's grenades fully cools down. Inferno Protocol. While arc knives are active, Rafa's exosuit stores all damage dealt to him. The exosuit then heats up and constantly deals a small amount of fire damage to him. Additionally, Rafa's melee attacks deal bonus fire damage. A portion of all damage dealt to Rafa is also dealt to enemies he has marked. Using Blade Fury causes Rafa to consume all stored damage and deals bonus fire damage based on stored damage. A portion of all damage dealt this way is returned to Rafa as health. Keep in mind you can only invest 1 into this one as well, but it's really powerful. Next up here is El Diablito. A portion of all fire damage Rafa deals also deals bonus fire ordnance damage. Starts off with plus 10% of damage dealt. Synergia. Whenever Rafa deals ordnance damage, he also deals increased gun damage and melee damage, and this effect stacks. Moving on, El Borracho. Rafa deals increased corrosive damage while his action skill is active. The longer it has been active, the greater the bonus. Acid Drop. Arc Knife's dash attack is replaced by Caustic Leap. Pressing left trigger causes Rafa to leap forward and create a caustic hazard wherever he lands. Whenever a mark is removed from an enemy, it explodes in a corrosive nova. Oh, that's sick. Empuge. Rafa gains increased action skill duration. That is really handy, and you can invest 5 into this. And it starts off with plus 7% extra duration. Cruel Accrual. Rafa gains increased skill damage with all skills. The longer his action skill has been active, the greater the bonus. Starting off with skill damage of plus 2% per second. Next up here is Galvanic Panic. This is another capstone skill, so you can only invest 1 into this one. Whenever Rafa performs a melee attack while Arc Knives is active, fire an Acid Storm Glider at an enemy in his view. Acid Storm Gliders deal corrosive splash damage based on the number of total marked enemies. Additionally, killing an enemy while Arc Knives is active restores action skill duration. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to fire a volley of Acid Storm Gliders in front of him and end Arc Knives. So yeah, pretty powerful, especially if you're aiming for a corrosive style build. Next up here is the Motivar skill. Pressing left trigger during Arc Knives grants increased overdrive duration. This bonus is reset whenever Rafa activates an action skill, starting off with duration of plus 5%. Sustainable Energy. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains health regeneration based on how much overdrive time is remaining, starting off with up to 0.8% max health per second. El Perigua. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing some of these, but what this does is Rafa gains increased splash damage and increased splash damage critical hit chance. Next up here is another powerful skill. This is an augment skill. It's called Thunder Cutter. Arc Knives attacks deal shock melee splash damage. Rafa deals increased splash damage, starting off with plus 50% splash damage. Blowout. Whenever Rafa applies a heavy arms mark or critical hits an enemy with his action skill, they explode in corrosive lobbed projectiles. The longer Rafa's action skill has been active, the more corrosive projectiles are spawned. And you can invest 5 into this. Protecto Pulse. Pressing left trigger while Arc Knives are active, or Rafa re-triggers his action skill, drains a portion of Rafa's shields and deals that much shock damage to nearby enemies. Starting off with up to 20% of max shields. Shock Market skill. Whenever Rafa deals splash damage, deal bonus shock damage based on the damage dealt. It starts off with plus 10% of damage dealt, and you can invest 5 into this one as well. Huracan Special, and this is another capstone skill, so you can only invest 1 into this one, but it's really powerful. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to spin his blades, creating a singularity that draws in all marked enemies and other nearby enemies while dealing continuous shock damage. Whenever this attack kills an enemy, Overdrive grants increased action skill cooldown rate, and it has 111 per second of damage dealt. And lastly, for the Arc Knives skill tree is Liquidation. You can only invest 1 into this passive skill, and it states here, marked enemies killed by Rafa leave behind a corrosive hazard. Alright, so now let's get into his Peacebreaker Cannon's action skill, and its skill tree. As you can see, here's what this action skill does. Equip Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons, which automatically fire at enemies in Rafa's crosshairs, dealing kinetic gun damage. If the enemy dies, or you press up on D-pad, the Peacebreaker Cannons find a new target. Holding LB ends Peacebreaker Cannons and refunds a portion of the remaining action skill duration as action skill cooldown. And the skill trees for this action skill are Cidiar. This will make it so Rafa gains increased gun damage. Deft Hands. Rafa and his Peacebreaker Cannons gain increased fire rate. Shield Barriest. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased shield recharge rate and improved shield regeneration delay while Overdrive is active. CYA. Kill skill. Killing an enemy restores shields based on Rafa's maximum health capacity. And here's one of his augment skills. Of course, you can only invest 1 into this, but it's called Bullet Buddy Deluxe. While Peacebreaker Cannons are active, Rafa and his allies regenerate ammo. Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons deal bonus fire damage based on how full his gun is, and his turrets shoot exploding bullets while his magazine is full. Pressing LB while Peacebreaker Cannons are active causes Rafa's shots to consume no ammo, but causes his action skill duration to drain faster. Freaking awesome. Anyways, next skill is called Field Repairs. This makes it so whenever Rafa activates an action skill, it restores a portion of his maximum shield capacity. If his shields are already full, gain overshield instead. And you can invest 3 into that one. Starts off with shields restored at plus 15%. Next up here is another augment skill, so another really powerful skill you can get. And here's what it does. Rafa's Peacebreaker Cannons gain increased critical hit chance. Pressing LB while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to double their critical hit chance and gain increased critical hit damage, while also causing his action skill duration to drain faster. Kill skill. Killing an enemy causes Rafa to regain action skill duration while also causing his action skill duration to drain faster. Quite a bit of good numbers there too that'll help with, and it can have up to 10 max stacks. Next up here is Jiraga. Whenever Rafa critically hits an enemy, action skill duration is restored. Resiliencia. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased damage reduction while overdrive is active. And you can invest 5 into this, and it starts off with damage reduction of plus 8%. It's pretty nice. Maestro. Rafa gains increased skill damage, so that's going to improve all of your skills. That's freaking awesome. Anyways, next up here is Venjaza. Whenever Rafa's shields break after being fully recharged, spawn a free grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, use that grenade instead. Anyways, next up here I got another augment skill for y'all. It's called Insta Fort Battle System. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons also deal ordnance damage, and he deals increased ordnance damage while Peacebreaker cannons are active. Pressing LB while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to disconnect from Rafa and become a turret companion that begins firing at enemies in place. Additionally, it will occasionally fire grenades at its targets. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, it copies that grenade. Pressing LB again returns the turret companion to Rafa's back. That's awesome. So the Peacebreaker cannons disconnect from Rafa and become a turret companion and begin firing at enemies after you press LB or whatever you're playing on. LB if you are using an Xbox controller. And it will occasionally fire grenades too. It's freaking cool. Anyways, next up here we got Confetti. Rafa's ordnance deal bonus damage in his current weapon's element. Pain reaction. Rafa's weapons gain a chance to ricochet off of enemies with status effects. Ricochet damage is based on the damage dealt. El Alacran. Probably just butchered that. Enemies damaged by Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons have increased status effect chance. You can only invest 1 into that one though. Beam Team. This is a capstone skill, so you can only invest 1 into this one, but it's really powerful. Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons. Weapons are replaced with a shock beam and a corrosive beam. Each beam automatically locks onto enemies in your view and may lock onto different enemies. Whenever Rafa applies a status effect, gain increased action skill damage. Wow. So the Peacebreaker cannons are going to be shooting out a shock beam and a corrosive beam now if you use this one. Next up here we got Inspirado. Whenever Rafa inflicts a status effect on an enemy, gain increased action skill cooldown and improved action skill duration rate. This effect stacks. Next up is Lightning Rod. While aiming with a gun, Rafa deals bonus shock damage. Each time Rafa hits an enemy this way, deal increased bonus damage until he zooms out. Max stacks of 20, and you can invest 5 into this one. Next up here is Vitriol. The first shot fired from Rafa's fully loaded magazine deals bonus corrosive damage. Starts off with a bonus damage of plus 11%, but you can invest 5 into this to get it more powerful. Carrying on here, we got Barrage. This is the bottom right side of his skill tree, by the way. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased splash damage while overdrive is active. Unmissable missiles. This is an augment skill, so you can only invest 1 into this, but it states pressing LB while Peacebreaker cannons is active causes them to fire a volley of homing rockets at enemies in view at the cost of action skill duration, and it shoots out, states 6 rockets. Everdrive. Overdrive gains increased duration. Tamario. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased gun damage but decreased weapon handling. This bonus is based on how long Overdrive has been active. It's pretty cool. Devil May Care. Wow, instead of Devil May Cry. Overdrive skill. While Overdrive is active, Rafa gains increased move speed and gains health regeneration. While Overdrive is not active, Rafa takes increased damage and gains increased action skill cooldown. High risk, high reward skill there. Saltado. Kill skill. Double all Overdrive bonuses. And lastly over here at the bottom right, we got Volatile Hollow Points. It's a capstone skill, and it states Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons weapons are replaced with rockets that deal splash damage. Okay, carrying on to the bottom left side now. Starting off with the augment skill called Hell in a Shell. Pressing LB while Peacebreaker cannons are active causes them to fire 2 large fire bombs that deal fire damage to a large area. Killing enemies reduces this skill's cooldown. Asymmetric Warfare. Indirect projectiles gain increased damage. Indirect projectiles include all action skill weapons, thrown weapons, and projectiles not fired from your gun. You can invest 5 into this. Rolling Stone. While moving, shots have a chance to bounce off of Rafa. This chance is doubled while sliding. And you can invest 5 into this, and it starts off with a bounce chance of 7%. Ardid. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain lifesteal. And then, once again, you can invest 5 into this, and it starts off with plus 10% lifesteal. That's pretty high. Errant Spark. All indirect projectiles deal bonus fire damage. If the indirect projectile already deals fire damage, double the bonus damage. Proprietary Incendiary. Melee Override. Press and hold the right stick to lob a storm glider at an enemy. Once it reaches its targets, it explodes and deals fire splash damage based on the amount of ammo in Rafa's gun when he threw the storm glider. Wow. You can only invest 1 into this, by the way. Double Alt Auto Shot. This is a capstone skill, and it states here, Rafa's Peacebreaker cannons weapons are replaced with shotguns that deal increased damage and have increased pellet count. Additionally, Rafa's turrets gain a chance to ricochet off of targets. Ricochets deal reduced damage, and critical hits always ricochet. Oh my gosh. So you could turn them into shotguns too. Anyways, lastly up here at the bottom left for the Peacebreaker Cannons action skill tree, we got Lateral Plinking. Rafa's indirect projectiles gain a chance to ricochet, and the ricochet chance will be plus 25%. You can only invest 1 into this one. So yeah, that's all of them for the Peacebreaker Cannons. Now lastly, but certainly not least, let's move on to the action skill Apophis Lance and its skill tree. As you can see, here's what the Apophis Lance action skill does. Equip Rafa's Apophis Lance, an offhand arm cannon that decreases Rafa's gun handling, but allows him to fire piercing shock ordnance blasts. Any unused charges when Apophis Lance ends are converted into action skill cooldown. Press left trigger to fire a piercing shock ordnance blast at enemies and consume a charge. Or hold left trigger to charge Rafa's Apophis Lance for increased damage, projectile size, and projectile speed at the cost of more charges. So yeah, now let's get into all the skills within the skill tree. Starting off with Rinse. Rafa gains increased reload speed. You can invest 5 into that. Next up is Las Jaras. Overdrive skill. Rafa regenerates ammo while overdrive is active. The Thrill. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased fire rate, gain further increased fire rate while overdrive is active. Ariba. Kill skill. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy, he gains increased ordnance cooldown rate. Starts off with an ordnance cooldown rate of plus 9% and duration of 12 seconds. And you can invest 5 into this one, as you can see. Here's his augment skill, Battery Subscription Service. Apophis Lance gains an additional charge. Additionally, when Rafa consumes 4 or more charges, gain increased action skill potency. And yeah, action skill potency of plus 100%, duration 36 seconds. It's nice. Pedintro. Activating an action skill grants Rafa health regeneration. Starts off with 0.5% for 8 seconds. Next up, here's another augment skill called Sangre por Sangre. Whenever Rafa consumes a charge, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This bonus is increased for every charge consumed, plus 25% per charge consumed, and duration 8 seconds. It's pretty solid to get your action skill back faster. Next up here is another passive skill that you can invest 5 in called Preparado. Whenever Rafa reloads his current gun, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This affects stacks. Wow, seems like there's many different ways to get your action skill back with the Apophis Lance. Starts off with plus 4% per stack and max stack of 100. First impression. The first shot fired from a fully loaded weapon magazine gains increased damage. Starts off with plus 8% gun damage. And you can invest 5 into this as well. Al Centro. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with all weapons and action skills while overdrive is active. The longer overdrive has been active, the greater the bonus. I feel like I don't need to say you can invest 5 into it because you can see, but yeah, you can invest 5 into that one too. I feel like I'll keep repeating myself if I keep saying that over and over. But yeah, anyways, next up here we got Metal Management. Whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, his gun consumes no ammo. You can invest 1 into that one. Abajo. Whenever Rafa throws a grenade, he gains increased action skill cooldown rate. Wow, another one to increase your action skill cooldown. You're going to be getting the Apophis Lance action skill back extremely fast if you combine a lot of these skills. Yeah, I could see it now. Anyways, next up here, I think it's called Jackway. I hope I'm not butchering it too bad, but yeah, it states here, whenever Rafa damages an enemy with a skill, he gains a stack of Jackway. For every stack of Jackway, he gains increased overdrive bonuses. Whenever overdrive ends, lose all stacks. And you can have max stack of 20. Starting off, that is. You can invest 5 into this too. Anyways, next up here's another augment skill called Engorged Boar. Apophis Lance gains increased projectile size, projectile speed, and increased number of chains. Heck yeah. It'll add up to plus 3 chains, plus 50% more speed, and plus 25% more size. Next up here is La Garza. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased weapon handling with weapons and action skills while overdrive is active. Deadline. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased fire rate and increased reload speed while overdrive is active. You invest 5 into this too. And wow, starts off with plus 3% fire rate and plus 5% reload speed. Per my last. Whenever Rafa deals damage with an action skill to an enemy, he gains a chance to deal that damage again. Double damage chance starts off with plus 4%. That's nice. Here's a capstone skill. Project Gorgon. Apophis Lance's weapon is replaced with an incendiary laser that pierces enemies. Pressing and holding left trigger causes the laser to deal increased damage and chain some more enemies as it consumes charges. Damage 121 per second. Whoa. That seems really solid. Mate. When overdrive ends, convert all jack stacks into mate stacks. Gain increased action skill cooldown rate for every stack of mate. Once Rafa's action skill is readied, lose all stacks of mate. Once again, another skill that will help with the cooldown for this action skill. But yeah, that's all the bottom right. Now let's get into the bottom center. El Soldado. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains increased gun damage while overdrive is active. This bonus is doubled while Rafa is charging Apophis Lance. Gibby Struck module. This is an augment skill. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy with his Apophis Lance, spawn a free grenade on that enemy. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, spawn a copy of that grenade instead. Oh, that's nice. Drone defense. Whenever Rafa activates an ordnance, spawn storm gliders that hover near him. As he takes damage, transfer some of that damage to his storm gliders. Once a storm glider receives too much damage, it explodes, dealing corrosive splash damage to nearby enemies. Oh, wow. And you can invest 5 into this. Storm glider health plus 23, damage plus 40, and max storm gliders 3. Of course, it will be better the more you invest into it. Drone assault. Whenever Rafa activates or re-triggers an action skill, send one of his storm gliders at an enemy in his view. Once it arrives, it explodes in a corrosive explosion equal to its remaining health. You can only invest 1 into that though. Project Basilisk. Apophis Lance now fires a corrosive blob that leaves a corrosive hazard and splits into several smaller projectiles whenever it detonates. The more charges Apophis Lance consumes at once, the more it splits. Damage 151. That is a capstone skill too, by the way. The right tools. What this does is Rafa gains increased ordnance damage after reloading his gun. This bonus stacks, and you can invest 5 into this one too to get it better. Starting off with ordnance damage of plus 12%. Detonation. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with an action skill, place a remote detonator on that enemy. Ordnance override. Detonate all remote detonators. Remote detonators gain increased damage and increased splash radius for every remote detonation. And you can invest 5 into this too. Okay, lastly here, moving on to the bottom left of the skill tree. Conductivo. Rafa gains increased status effect chance and also gains further increased shock chance too. And you can invest 5 into that. Next up here is an augment skill called Ojo Rojo. Apophis Lance gains critical hit chance. Whenever Rafa damages an enemy with Apophis Lance, gain further increased critical hit chance. Gives you critical hit chance plus 40%, bonus critical hit chance plus 35%, and a duration of 8 seconds. Brain Dump. Overdrive skill. Rafa gains critical hit chance with his guns while overdrive is active. Starts off with critical hit chance of plus 5%. El Catron. After sliding, Rafa's action skill deals bonus shock damage and he deals increased critical hit damage too. Another capstone skill called Project Raju. Apophis Lance's weapon is replaced with a close-range shocking taser burst. Pressing and holding causes Rafa to deal shock damage all around him. The longer Rafa holds this attack, the greater damage it deals. Damage 81 per second and damage scalar plus 50% per second. That sounds nice, especially for close range. All. Whenever Rafa shocks an enemy, all shots fired at that enemy are critical hits. You can only invest 1 into this though. That'll be a nice combination with that capstone skill I just covered, Raju. Anyways, lastly up here is Fiesta. Whenever Rafa applies a status effect, his action skills consume no duration and Apophis Lance consumes no charges. You can invest 5 into this and it starts off with 0.50 seconds. So yeah, there you have it everyone. That is all of the action skills and skill trees you can get with the new Vault Hunter Rafa. Hopefully this helps you brainstorm some builds in your head before the release and know what you're working with before you can play with this character. But yeah, if you could, consider leaving a like on this video. The support is greatly appreciated and I would love to know what your favorite action skill and skill tree is. If you feel like jotting that down below in the comments and maybe why. Maybe you have a build that you want to share in the comments. That'd be cool. But yeah, I'm out of here though everyone. As always, most importantly, appreciate y'all taking the time watching and listening. Until next time, peace.